Well, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear us okay. A little caveat, this is obviously the first time that we've done this. We were all hoping to be together in Manchester, but gladly the speakers have been able to join in. We had a quick test of this yesterday, so please bear with us. Hopefully things will go well. But if not, then please email us afterwards with any feedback that you've got. So this is the Fusion21 Members Forum North, and a welcome to everyone. We're discussing the delivery of zero carbon and how that can be achieved. And again, as we all know, the climate emergency has prompted many housing organisations to place energy efficiency at the top of their agendas. And today we're going to hear from a number of different speakers, 13 Group and Engie and Kensa. I'm Andrew Gray, Member Relations Manager at Fusion21. And again, hopefully I know many of you, but you're all very welcome to this webinar. As I said, the speakers this morning are Samantha Granger from 13 Group. Samantha leads 13's dedicated team of specialists who are driving the organisation's plan to reduce its environmental impact, setting the strategic direction, looking at priorities and actions to deliver innovative ways to reduce the carbon footprint and protect the environment. Jonathan Horner from Engie. Jonathan is experienced and dedicated, highly qualified, has recently been promoted to refurbishment director for the Northeastern Cumbria, and has a strong track record in successful delivery of large-scale refurbishment projects. Engie is a leading energy and services company and working alongside their contractor partner, Kensa Heat Pumps. Contracting is currently finalising a pioneering project in Sunderland with the Gen 2 group, which will see the largest tower blocks gas replaced. And again, Stuart will be, Jonathan will be talking through that project alongside Stuart Gadsden. And Dr. Stuart Gadsden has over 20 years experience of studying and working in the field of renewable energy. Following his PhD, he's worked as a consultant engineer before becoming operational manager at a renewable energy installation company and product manager at global heat pump manufacturer. Stuart joined Kensa in 2015 as technical sales manager, focusing on shared ground loop GSHP systems, ground source heat pumps, I think that is, within the residential sector. So, we do want to hear from you, the audience, who are hopefully there, though you are, as you're probably aware, you are on mute. You should see on your screens a question box. We're going to keep an eye on that question box. So if you have a comment or a question to ask the panel, please do type that message, and we'll try and keep an eye on those questions as we go through, and hopefully then the panel, I'll be able to ask the panel the questions when we finished, and we'll go through those questions. So please don't be shy and post those questions as we go through or at the end of the presentation. So I'm now going to hand over to Sam from 13 Group, and hopefully Sam will now have control of the presentation, and she will be able to talk you through it.
Hello.
Good morning, Sam.
Morning. Right. Thank you for the introduction. Yes. My name is Sam Granger. I'm the Senior Environmental Manager with 13 Group. I've been working in the sector for about 10 years now, doing a variety of jobs. Back in the day, 10 years ago, I did actually join the organisation to originally look at their carbon footprint one of the subsidiary groups, Fabric Housing. More recently, I've been working on the strategic plan, looking at the projects and programme. But as our focus has required us to look more at our environmental impacts, I have recently moved back into this role. My presentation today really is showing you what our journey has been over the past 12 months, where we're at now and what we're looking at in the near future. For those of you who are not familiar with 13 Group, trying to move forward and not moving. I've gone backwards. There we are. These pictures just give you a little bit of a summary of who we are. We're a large social provider in the northeast predominantly. Most of our properties are within the Tees Valley area, but we do reach up to the Scottish borders and down into North Yorkshire. We currently have just under 34,000 homes and employ more than 1,600 colleagues. An asset base worth over £1 billion. So our journey so far. It was about this time last year that we began having conversations with leadership and with our board of directors on what our approach should be, given the change and the drive from government and the regulators on how we should be responding to these acts. So the Green Paper, the Clean Growth Strategy, the Climate Change Act, which has obviously been around for quite some time, and then the overall issue of tackling climate change. At the time, it was very much focused on our stock. What did it mean for our 30-year investment plan? How could we look to understand what we needed to do to try and remove the need for gas boilers in any of our new builds? We have quite an ambitious new homes development team and programme, which sees us developing at least 400 properties a year. And that's going to increase over the next 5 to 10 years. So obviously that's a big thing for us to understand. But also with the 34,000 properties, how do we ensure that we move those to zero carbon? So we brought together a mixture of individuals from across the organisation, asking questions of ourselves about what we need to think about when we're looking at these factors and these potential issues or opportunities. From the session, feedback. I'm not sure if it's a delay on me pressing the wrong buttons. Not moving. Sorry, might be me being technically inept here.
Hello, Sam.
Hi, yeah, it's not moving forward.
Okay, I just moved that forward. So is that the
Brilliant,
slide?
thank you.
If you just if you
That's
just then
yeah.
I'll.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, so during the sessions, it became quite apparent that really we needed to think wider than just what we're going to be doing with our stock. Feedback from all of the stakeholders involved was that we really need to be thinking about our customers first, how any changes are going to affect affordability for them, thinking about technology that we're placing in properties. We don't want to be placing people in spaceships that they can't control. Understanding the effect it's going to have on the energy efficiency of the property, but also the cost involved. Quite a lot of thought on how we should be tackling the fabric first and completely removing the need for heat in the first place. Can you move me on to the next slide, please? So through these sessions, we came to the conclusion that really we need to be thinking about this in kind of three big chunks. So first of all, what we need to do to support our customers, what we need to do to decarbonise the homes, and what we need to be doing from a business point of view. So this is kind of like starting to set the foundation of what our approach is going to be to reduce our environmental impacts, tackle climate change, and help with fuel poverty. Next slide, please. Mixed with that, obviously, is across throughout last year, there was the big change in the push from the public, the media's interest, you know, Blue Planet and Greta, and everybody's starting to make a real and take some real interest in what's happening with climate change. There's also been the rise in the climate emergency. Next page, please. With a number of our local authorities actually declaring climate emergency. This obviously started to gain some momentum middle of last year. Next page. And with for ourselves, we were looking at what that meant within the Northeast. What did it mean for the local authorities we work within? As I explained at the beginning, 13 are, we've got a large area that we cover and a number of local authorities. So any type of approach that we develop in how we're going to tackle climate change, we really need to try and align it to what the local authorities and the demand of the communities around us are going to be expecting. Having so many interested parties makes it ever so slightly more difficult. Within the Tees Valley itself, where we do have about 80% of our stock, we have 5 different local authorities, plus we have the Tees Valley Combined Authority. Of those 5, Redcar and Cleveland have declared climate emergency, and they've declared that based on everything happening within Redcar. Their scope is to cover industry, housing, everything, and they're looking at reducing a target of 2030. Darlington, another one of our local authorities, have also set for 2030, but theirs is based on the activities of the council itself. So they're not taking into account the activities of others. Since, well, over the last couple of weeks, we've continued conversations with other local authorities of Stockton and Middlesbrough. Stockton have declared that they're not going to declare. They've been making a lot of developments in their climate approach and have already significantly reduced their carbon footprint. Middlesbrough Council are currently looking at what their approach is going to be. On top of this, we then have the Tees Valley Combined Authority. They are developing an approach to reduce and hit zero carbon by 2040, but their focus is very much industry based. Although as a housing provider, we have been involved in talks, we haven't been their number one focus. Next page, please. So what does this look like for 13 overall? Next page. So when it comes to our portfolio, we're actually already in quite a good position. Majority of our properties are already above band C, so above average back in 16-17. We've done most of the low-hanging fruit. We've done our loft top-ups. We've done cavity wall installation where we can. And our last analysis showed that we had just 850 properties within a band E. Next page, please. We have, this one, if you could just click through till it all comes on. We have already been looking at renewables. We've got currently about 1,700 properties which either have solar thermal, photovoltaics, or air source heat pumps installed. We've had programs of air source heat pumps and other renewables ongoing since about 2016, and we're confident in where to use them and how to manage them, etc. And we've had some really good success, but we're not sure if that is the answer for us moving forward for the rest of the stock. We've currently engaged with Savills to do a large-scale survey of all of our stock and to do some modelling for us. The modelling that's going to be undertaken is going to be looking not only at how we can move towards decarbonisation, what that would look like, what we could try, the costs involved, which is obviously a big factor, but also adding on to there what we need to do with regards to health and safety, the response to the Hackett report, etc. We're hoping that we will have that analysis completed by the summer, in order that we're able to model it out and take some options to our leadership and board within the following few months, and hopefully look to have some short-term answers around November time. Next page, please. We've also been doing a lot of work to understand what this means for us as a business. We recognise that we need to make sure that we're obviously keep ourselves legal and safe and continue to demonstrate value for money. These two pieces of regulation are both ones that 13 feels the need to respond to. We did actually submit in line with the Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme back in December, as was the deadline. And we're currently measuring our carbon footprint for the year 2019-20. Obviously, it doesn't finish till the end of this month, in order to adhere to the streamlined emissions and carbon reporting. Both of these will help us to understand as an organisation where we are with regards to our emissions. If I cover ESOS to start with, our submission back in December highlighted to us internally the improvements we needed to make to actually capture and understand the energy use as an organisation. As part of the ESOS, you submit a year's worth of energy bills. This highlighted to us a number of issues with regards to the way that we are keeping energy information. As probably for a number of organisations, energy bills are kept purely on a cost basis. We hadn't been recording the kilowatt hours inside any central systems, so it became a very paper-based exercise. Since then, we've changed the way that we're recording data in order to help us with our SECR submission. However, the SECR submission is slightly different, as that is a measurement of the carbon footprint and includes other things that are not included in the ESOS, such as staff travel. So we're currently working across the team to pull that together. What we did find as a result of the ESOS is that we're perhaps not being as efficient as we could be. Move on to the next one for me, please. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far. This is a demonstration of carbon footprint for those of you who are not familiar. This is something that's readily available online, and it just gives you an oversight of what would and wouldn't be included in a carbon footprint. When you're reporting in line with SECR, you are required to report both all of your scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. there's also a requirement to include any carbon emissions from staff travel, predominant just by car. That's not anybody commuting, but it is any travel that they undertake in order to deliver your services. Next slide, please. This slide gives an overview of what we found from our 2018-19 footprint through our, and this was as part of the ESOS submission. You can see there that when we looked at the kilowatt breakdown, it was natural gas that was responsible for most of the kilowatt demand. That came from space heating predominantly within our high-rise blocks or any of our multi-occupancy buildings. Now, for the ESOS report, all of that needed to be included. However, when you move towards doing your SECR submission, you report that in line with the greenhouse gas protocol, and it's best practice, or it's recommended, that you need to choose if you're going to report based on a financial responsibility for some emissions or operational control. Financial would mean you report on anything that you pay the bills for yourself physically, whereas operational is where you have operational control over the energy used. Which way you go will really depend on how your business operates and what is best for you to be able to manage. After some consultation with a local consultant, we have decided to go with operational control. What that will mean is that when we do our carbon footprint report for this year, we will need to understand of that gas and electricity that is used within our high-rise and multi-occupancy buildings. We'll need to understand how much of it is within the control of us as an organisation and how much is actually under the control of our customers. We will have this information due to the service charges. So where utilities are actually then handed over to customers via a service charge, that is a demonstration that they're out of our operational control. So those calculations will need to be done in order to get our footprint correct. We move on to the next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the difference when it comes to cost. On the previous slide, you could see that the majority of kilowatts came from gas. However, due to the cost of electricity being much higher than gas, it is electricity that is costing us the most money. This also therefore means that that's where we are then passing those costs on to our customers. Again, highlighting the need for us to look at how we can get efficiencies through our energy consumption. Next slide, please. Through the process, as well, as I alluded to earlier, we have had issues with data availability, the quality and format, estimated billing. We currently have around 900 sites that we are paying the gas and electricity bills for centrally, some of which, say, goes out as service charge. Too high a proportion of that is actually on estimated billing, due to the fact that meters are in locked cupboards, or where they're not on the AMR meters, they're not on the smart meters, sorry. Obviously, anywhere that's got high demand and is on a 3-phase meter, we do get half-hour meter readings. But where we've got low-level usage with so lighting within a 2-up, 2-down, or shared stairways, etc., there's a risk that those areas have been on estimated billings for some time. So we're currently working with our energy providers to get smart meters installed where we can. We've got about 400 sites with one of our suppliers at the moment, and that program's looking to be rolled out over the next couple of months. So that'll help us to get better understanding of the usage and where our high usage areas are, that then we can help to bring down the cost for our customers. We're also looking at having somebody who has clear oversight and management of our energy supplies. Even just one point of contact, helping to make it easy within the business to track and understand where energy is being used, and again, to drive efficiencies. Next slide, please. This is a very basic demonstration of what our plan is over the next 5 years with regards to our energy. The scale to the left is percentage. So we are, as I indicated earlier, we are looking to capture and understand our complete energy use this year for 1920, and that will inform our baseline. In 2021, our aim is really to look at increasing the efficiency within the billing, getting rid of all of the estimates where we can, and ensuring that our data is as accurate and as good a place as it can be before we move into 21-22. March 21-22, we are due to reprocure our energy provision. We'll be looking to bring all of the energy supplies together. As part of that, we'll be investigating the opportunity to do some green procurement, look at if we can offset our use by buying in energy from renewable sources. Obviously, being the caveat being that we need to ensure that that is real renewable energy and that we're not greenwashing any of our information. The blue band will continue over the next 4 years as we drive efficiency to make sure that we are getting the billing where it needs to be. We'll also then be looking to bring in some technological efficiencies. So where can we reduce demand within the high rise or with our multi-occupancy building by changing the lighting, looking at the use of renewables, where is there an opportunity to improve the fabric of the buildings to reduce energy use, etc. So that's something that will be informed with the work we're doing with Savills, but also in our longer term asset strategy on looking at our multi-occupancy buildings. Next slide, please. So the next steps for us really is to continue the development of our energy management approach, and also continue and finish off our carbon footprint, finish the evaluation plan, and roll out some staff engagement. We're aware that all of the plans we have in place, we're going to need our staff on board and actually to be able to push it through. And we're going to work with staff and our wider stakeholders to understand and set our short, medium and longer term targets. We've been doing some staff engagement over the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, we've had to cancel a number of our staff engagement events that were due to happen over the next couple of weeks. So looking at how we can do that more digitally. If we move on to the next slide, please. We've just started to develop our campaign. This is hot off the press. So we've just got this back from our design team yesterday. We're going with a take control. So we've got the CO2 in there, but it's very much a message of this is about everybody getting behind this movement. It's about customers helping to take control. It's about staff taking control, and people actually understanding that every little helps. That, you know, as Greta would say, no change is too small and nobody is too small to make a difference. Next slide, please. So this is just another example of how we'll be using that on our intranet and really launching the campaign. As I say, we were due to be working on that this week. We may be pushing it back a little way. Yeah, we'll see what happens there. And next slide, please. I think that's it from me. If anybody's got any questions or they think of any after today, those are my contact details. I'm happy for anybody to get in touch.
Excellent. Well, thank a virtual round of applause, I think, from me and no doubt the other people listening. There was a question from Jonathan, which is around which business is recording your carbon footprint.
The carbon footprint, it's been done internally by myself and our team. We have engaged with a local consultant called Annalisa Mills, quite well known in the Northeast. So she's been supporting me by delivering some training to the team. But my background is environmental management. So I've got the skills to undertake that myself.
Okay, great. And the other question I had, Sam, is from an overall sort of business plan perspective, have you actually costed what all these changes will be? And inevitably, with the challenge I think the sector has, is how much of business plan expenditure is going on new build accommodation, refurbishment, and I just wonder, you know, within 13 Group, how those arguments are raging, and whether or not you have a clear steer from your board, for example, in terms of how much you are going to spend on achieving what you've set out to achieve.
Yeah, the conversations around that are still are continuing and ongoing, if I'm honest. The work we're doing with Savills is to continue some work we've done ourselves in-house. So looking at our stock, in order to bring it up and get it to zero carbon or net zero carbon, we could be looking up anything from £35,000 to £40,000 per property. I have heard others using a figure of £20,000, but I think that's quite quite low. So that's why we're doing the work with Savills, really, for them to help us model that out and see what it would look like, because it's by any measure it breaks our financial plan by looking at putting that much in for our properties. When it comes to the new build, we are committed, obviously, to removing gas boilers, increasing efficiencies. At the moment, we are reviewing it case by case or scheme by scheme, depending on the local demands or the local requirements from the local authorities. So we've already seen a change in what's been expected from the planners. For instance, in Hartlepool, we are being asked for 10% generation on site for energy. At the moment, our answer for new builds is the use of air source heat pumps and/or photovoltaics, because they are methods that we are comfortable with, that we've had success with in our stock. Also improving the thermal efficiency of the property where we can, but again, we need to be mindful of the cost, and we need to ensure that the cost of the schemes doesn't impact on the amount of properties we're able to deliver and/or that we've committed to.
Okay, and then just finally, I'm conscious of time and that we've got Jonathan and Stuart lined up, but one question from Lydia Stockdale is around, has Blue Planet, Greta, etc., and the rising resulting public awareness around climate change, has that made the 13 journey easier, or has it been an easier sell to the board and executive, perhaps, say if you'd been in this position having this conversation 12 months ago?
I would say yes. As I said, I joined the organisation 10 years ago, actually fresh out of finishing my master's, to come and help set our strategic plan, our strategic approach to carbon reduction. And then 5 years ago, everyone kind of, and I know it was across the sector due to cuts, etc. There there was less emphasis on that area of work, which is why I moved across into the programme management. And it's literally this time last year and the rise in public interest, I think, that steered our leaderships and the boards to start taking things more seriously, realising that it was important and we needed to take action.
Yeah, okay, and I'm sure that's probably a similar position across the board. Okay, well, thank you ever so much, Sam, for your contribution this morning. I'm now hopefully going to try and give control of the keyboard to Jonathan. And as I said at the beginning, Jonathan, if he doesn't control it, I might have to do what we did before. Jonathan works as he's the refurbishment director at Engie, and Engie, together with Kensa heat pumps, are currently involved in a project name called 364, delivering on behalf of Sunderland-based housing association Gen 2 a £90 million investment of tower blocks. So hopefully everyone can hear you, Jonathan, and if you could then do your presentation. And again, just a reminder to the audience, if you do have any questions, please use the question box, and we'll put those forward to the speakers after the presentation. So over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Andrew and Sam. Hopefully you can hear me all okay. Yes, thanks for the opportunity to speak this morning, albeit under unusual circumstances in this webinar. I was asked to give a bit of a presentation around the specific scheme that we are delivering on site now on behalf of Gen 2 Housing. So just a little bit of background about how the scheme actually came about. We've been working with Gen 2 on a number of frameworks over a number of years, and through our partnership working, we started to discuss with Gen 2 the headaches that they had, what was giving them a challenge, keeping them up on a night, and the North Towers as a scheme was presented to us as their biggest headache. The properties are 1960 built tower blocks, 13 stories high, housing 364 flats. And the aged nature of them, the individually gas-fired boilers were all failing, and Gen 2 were hoping to try and tie the replacement of their heating and hot water into their green agenda and how they could help try and decarbonise their stock. I can't seem to change the pages, so yeah, great. So a little bit of agenda today, a little bit of background and proposals of how we took the scheme forward with Gen 2, and then I'll run through the presentation, handing over to Stuart when we come down to the technical slides. But if you can flip over for me, please, Andrew. Thank you, and the next one. So a couple of key facts around the scheme that we're currently delivering for Gen 2. So it was a £9.5 million budget to work on the 7 tower blocks that are located in the Monk Weymouth area of Sunderland, north of the River Wear. The 364 individual flats within those tower blocks, and we have a 46-week programme to deliver all of the works. We've managed to secure with Gen 2 £4.5 million worth of RHI funding to contribute towards the scheme. But the overall key figure in there for Gen 2 is the CO2 savings that's predicted to be saved over the 20-year period, which is just over 2.5 million kilos. And a fun fact there, the boreholes that we are delivering on site there are up to 60 metres deep. So you can just flip over for me, please. So yeah, so again, the purpose was improvement for tenant welfare and safety by improving thermal comfort and removing gas from the high-rise buildings. All of these properties had a rising gas main through the core of the building, providing individual gas meters to their properties, which was a concern to Gen 2, given obviously the atrocity down at Grenfell, and they wanted to try and give their customers some safe peace of mind that the gas and a major source of obviously fire was going to be removed from their homes. So there was a need to remove the failing individual gas-fired combination boilers from all of the flats, and the desire to put in the most economically sustainable source of heating. So over a 6 to 9 month period, Engie worked with Gen2. We investigated several feasibility schemes, and the introduction of a district heating system seemed to give us the best all-round solution. The district heating was going to be served via the ground source heat pumps. So we introduced Kensa contracting as a specialist who could give us some support on the technical wares and warehouse of how we could deliver such high volume scheme, whilst the Gen2 residents remained in situ within their homes. That was a key driver for Gen2, that in reality they couldn't rehome 364 customers, so the properties would have to be worked on while the residents lived in the tower blocks. If you could flick the page, please. So the objectives, as we kind of briefly covered there, so it was removal of the natural gas from the buildings, replacing all of the gas-fired combination and hot water systems to give them a low carbon alternative solution. In order to do so, we were going to have to upgrade the current electrical systems to facilitate switch to an all electrical system. The base supplies into the buildings just wasn't large enough to cope with the additional demand. And as I said, deliver all this while the customers were living in their homes. Gen2 took the opportunity, obviously while we're working on these properties, to put in some additional scope of works for some safe measure, predominantly around new sprinkler systems, and to upgrade the existing fire alarms, so that it was giving again their customers that ultimate feel safe factor, and replace some soil vent pipes whilst we're working in the home. So there's a full array of work that we're going on while we're carrying out this works for Gen2. So if you can flip again, please, Andrew. So the proposal there, the 7 tower blocks, which hopefully you can see they're spread across the north banks of the River Wear, was providing the ground source heat pumps up through district heating for each site. So there was 5 sites housing 7 tower blocks. So each site would take its own communal heat pump and extract and discharge well to be able to deliver the district heating throughout the buildings, which would then lead to individual Kensa shoe pumps, which I'm sure Stuart will give you a little bit more technical detail on later. You can flip that one, please. So Stuart, do you want to give a little bit on the technology?
Absolutely, yep. If you can click the next slide, please, Andrew. So, yeah, Kensa, just a little bit of background about us. All we manufacture is ground source heat pumps, and we have been doing this since 1999. And last year we supplied approximately 40% of all the ground source heat pumps installed in the UK. I think what's unique about Kensa is that we also have a contracting division, and therefore we're able to design, supply and install ground source heat pump systems. And the solutions that we've been doing over the past few years have predominantly been our shared ground loop solutions. And this is where we have an individual heat pump inside each property connected to a shared network of pipes, and effectively we are circulating ambient temperature water around this network of pipes, and you only generate heat inside each individual dwelling. And effectively that's the approach that we've taken with the Gen2 North Towers projects. So if you can click to the next slide, please, Andrew. So I think it's always interesting just to make sure everyone understands how does a ground source heat pump work. A lot of people are still mystified by the technology, but effectively we all have a heat pump at home. You all are using your fridge, your freezer at home, and effectively a ground source heat pump's not so dissimilar to that technology. In simple terms, your ground source heat pump system has a heat source, the heat pump itself, and then your central heating system inside the property. In a typical ground source heat pump system, you'd probably picture Kevin McLeod standing next to a passive house on grand designs, and it's one house with its own array and its own heat pump. That's all well and good, and it's a great market, and that's what Kensa's been doing over the past 20 years. But if we want to take ground source heat pumps to mass deployment, and make it available to everyone, then we need to look at alternative solutions. And in our solution, effectively, you have one large array that's then connected to multiple heat pumps in multiple properties. So the heat source, typically we're using boreholes when we're doing large-scale deployment, and the boreholes that have a fluid circulating around them that's just picking up latent heat from the ground. Typically, we're gaining about 5 degrees of heat from the ground. All these boreholes combine together to effectively leave us with some riser pipework, and the riser pipework is then able to flow up and down the tower blocks, going to each individual heat pump. The heat pump itself, inside there, we have a heat exchanger that takes the heat that's coming in from the ground, and that heat is transferred to the refrigerant fluid that's circulating within the heat pump itself. That refrigerant has a low boiling point, so even though we have temperatures coming in at only between 0 and 10 degrees, that's warm enough to cause the refrigerant to boil, and effectively we now have a gas that then goes into the heat pump itself. The little yellow bit at the top of that heat pump moves up and down, and that is the compressor. So the heat pumps do require electricity to operate through the compressor. The compressor effectively concentrates the large volume of low-grade heat that we've taken from the ground into a much higher grade heat. So we have a gas that leaves the compressor at high temperature and high pressure. It passes through a heat exchanger. On the other side of that heat exchanger is the water that's circulating around the radiators, and we effectively are then giving that energy to the radiators. Inside the heat pump, once we've passed the energy over to the radiator circuit, that refrigerant fluid changes state from a gas back to a liquid, and then finally passes through something called an expansion valve at the bottom of the heat pump, causing the refrigerant to change its physical characteristics so that the process can begin again. But effectively, we've taken a large volume of low-grade heat from our heat source, used the heat pump to compress that and concentrate that heat so that we can supply it to our central heating system in the home. And effectively, we use, typically speaking, 1 unit of electricity within the heat pump to drive the compressors and the circulation pumps, but we actually get around about 3 units of heat going into the house. So it's typically about 300% efficient. If you compare that to direct electric heating system, that's only 100% efficient, and a gas boiler only around 90% efficient. So one of the key advantages of a heat pump is it produces more energy than the electrical energy it consumes. If we just go to the next slide, please, Andrew. What's slightly different with the solution up at the North Towers for Gen 2 is that there wasn't sufficient space around the tower blocks to do our traditional closed loop system, and closed loop system is just vertical boreholes with plastic piping. So we have installed instead an open loop system across the site. And then an open loop system, effectively each site we have 2 water wells, and as you look at the drawing here, the water well on the left hand side, we have a pump down there, and that is pumping water up from the actual underground aquifer. So beneath these tower blocks, once you've got to about 60 meters depth, we're into an underground aquifer that has effectively a limitless supply of water. We are pumping that water up from that well. We pass it through some heat exchangers in the plant room, and these heat exchangers are just located in the ground floor areas of the tower blocks. And then through that heat exchanger, the water then gets discharged back down a second well that's drilled on site, and again roughly to 60 meters, so that the water is then just pumped back into the aquifer. On the other side of the plate heat exchange in the plant room, we just have our riser pipework that's filled with a mixture of water and antifreeze, and that riser pipework is then just rising up each tower block, and then it branches off each floor to serve the flats on each floor. And then in each flat, there's an individual Kensa ground source heat pump providing the heating and hot water. That heat pump connected to the tenant's own electricity supply, so that they just pay for their energy bills directly to their utility company. And just to the next slide, please, Andrew. So effectively, the final solution at North Towers is we have the open loop borehole systems in the grounds of the building, and we have 4 pairs of wells across the different sites. And then we have heat exchangers in the basement riser pipework running all the way from the ground floor all the way to the top floor, which is the 13th story. And then once you're inside each property, there's a ground source heat pump that replaces the gas combi boiler, and it's that ground source heat pump that's now generating the heating and hot water. That is then connected to a brand new wet central heating system. So there's brand new radiators been installed, sized to work at the lower flow temperatures of a heat pump, around about 50 degrees C flow temperature through the radiators, obviously with new thermostatic radiator valves. Another novel piece of this project is that the hot water is being delivered via a sun amp heat battery, and this is a phase change thermal store. One of the reasons for using this at the project is they take up less space than a conventional cylinder, and they also require less maintenance than a traditional unvented hot water cylinder. And all the properties are also benefiting from new heating controls, which in this project is going to be the switchy controls, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So that's an overview of the system, and I'll hand over to Jonathan now, who'll take us through the project.
Thank you. So Undertaking the project was obviously key for Gen 2, and obviously with the customers living in during the works, liaison with their customers was key. We did that by having a team of liaison staff on site at all times who would work with the customers, meet individually on a daily basis and talk through the customers about the new systems that was going to be installed. The works out how it was going to take place, how it was going to be planned, and how the customers were ultimately going to have to think about how they would operate the new system. Obviously, going from a high output gas combination boiler to a low surface temperature ground source heat pump, the customers were going to have to think about how they use the energy and trying to keep the ambient temperatures up rather than just calling for heat and instantly getting heat within 20 minutes, for example. So there's a huge education piece that we've been doing with the customers because they are an older demographic. So we are having constant communication to try and engage with those customers to make sure that they do understand how to use the system. They still get the heat, instant hot water, but the heating does need to be used differently. If you can just go on to the next one. So Stuart gave a brief of the technology over there. So the next 3 or 4 slides are literally a walk through the job. So Kensa did a lot of design work. There's a lot of design work required to be done up front to establish that these buildings could actually take the heat pumps. Quite a lot was done via desktop analysis by geologists to make sure that the aquifer that Stuart mentioned was going to be accessible, and it did carry sufficient water temperatures in that aquifer to the right level to be able to work with the heat pumps. There was a lot of engagement with the Environment Agency to ensure that the necessary permissions were going to be granted to allow us to draw from that aquifer and discharge back into it, and that we weren't going to be creating any environmental issues, which all worked well. The risers obviously took a lot of plotting to make sure that we could get from the ground floor to the top floor, passing through existing service risers, making sure that we had enough space because there's a lot of pipe work and a lot of distribution to put through the building. In an existing building, you are limited in the space that you had, so there was a lot of surveys took place. It all panned out really well once we got to site. The time that we did spend, feasibility did come to fruition when we got on the site. A lot of structural calculations needed to make sure the penetration of the concrete floors and the like was going to be not leave the building in an unsafe state. So we did a lot of work up front, and that has been key to the project. Just move on to the next one, please. So obviously bore drilling, doing quite a lot of drilling down to take these bores. We had to carry out a UXO report. Monk Weymouth was heavily bombed during World War II, so the presence of unexploded ordnance was a risk. So we carried out the necessary UXO reports, and we did have to carry out some further moderate sampling on one of the sites because the risk was greater. And fortunately, when we did carry out the test, then there was no risk, and we were able to continue and deliver the bores at the required depth without risk. So if you just go on to the next, please. So the whistle stop through these, so undertaking the project. So as Stuart mentioned, the boreholes, only 2 but larger boreholes on each of these sites were then connected through a lot of trenching and headroom, where we connected the wells and the pipes together, which led into the heat exchangers on the ground floor. There was a small amount of remodeling to do on the ground floors to take the heat exchangers and the pumps that were brought in for the sprinkler systems, but it wasn't too invasive and there was enough space to be able to create that area. We go to the next slide, please. So there's a couple of pictures there that are typical of the riser pipe work. There's those 4 pipes that 2 of them go halfway up the building, the other 2 go to the top, excuse me. And as Stuart mentioned there, each flat will be fed from those risers. So you have a series of pipe work that goes from the main risers into the circulation areas and then valved off at the top of each door into the flats. So then it takes into the flat, and that's where you would then pick up the shoe boxes that Stuart talked about, which is the individual heat pump that serves each individual flat, so individually controlled by each resident. Look at the next one, please. So there's a picture there. So that's the little picture there is the shoe box. I would say in real life it's half the size of a traditional gas combination boiler. Which is brand new pipework that we installed into these properties. Went through new heating systems, new radiators. The Sunamp is the thermal store that Stuart mentioned, which is the phase change technology. Instantaneous hot water, very low maintenance. That is a larger unit, to be fair, but the benefits of that are seen to be great from a maintenance point of view and a cost point of view as well. They're very efficient, run at A grade. The Gen 2 chose to use the switchy smart controls that gave them the opportunity to be able to communicate with their customers through the digital display. They could help them monitor their energy usage and then help to educate them on the usage of that energy. If the system wasn't getting used correctly, it was fully tracked all of the usage, so that it's a good system to be able to show customers how to use the system properly. We replaced full upgrade of the electrical DB systems and the meter relocation for electrical smart metering. And then the add-ons was around the sprinkler system to give the customers that safe feeling that they're getting all this additional work done. They were going to have sprinklers installed into all of their flats, upgraded fire alarm systems. Yeah, and that's about it, I think. So on the next slide. I think ultimately the resident benefits that Gen 2 were keen to get over to their residents was probably some financial savings for the end user, estimated around £150 a year. Obviously some of that coming from only having a single supply of electric now, so no standing charge on gas meters. The increased thermal comfort for each customer, that the design of the heat pump system obviously was going to be give them a better ambient temperature throughout the day. Peace of mind again, no gas in the building. We did have to replace an awful lot of cookers because there was a lot of people still using gas for cooking, so that we all new electric cookers for people, reduced risk of carbon monoxide poison, and basically the ultimate for Gen 2 was around the carbon saving. We're going to come back to that nearly 2.5 million kilograms of carbon saving over the 20-year lifespan of the system. So it's going to be a great accolade for Gen 2, first in the country of this size to be degassing tower blocks and introducing the ground source heat pump district heating systems.
Okay.
Happy to take any questions.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions. Just picking up that last point around the sort of residents and so on. I know it's still early days, but how have residents coped with the need to provide ambient heat as opposed to looking after the being used to an old hot radiator as opposed to now one that's lukewarm?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it hasn't been a challenge. There has been some education to be done, but we highlighted that was going to be a concern very early in the project, or even in the feasibility stage. So we used our liaison team to communicate with the residents regularly. We took a number of the resident board members to a scheme that Kensa had done in conjunction with Engie down in London, so they could see for themselves firsthand and get the resident board member on side that he'd seen the system, seen how it works. But it was around the education piece. We set up a show flat where we put the system in and managed to get it up and running on a low temperature basis. So when customers came in, they understood that the radiator, they weren't going to be able to dry the clothes on the radiators and the like. So there was a lot of fact finding that we came and delivered to those customers. But it still is an education piece that we are running through with. Some people get it, some people need a little bit more support with that, which Gen 2 are picking up after we've handed over back to them. So we've done many sessions with the customers, but Gen 2's housing team have now been supporting them as we start to leave site.
Yeah, and I know that this was a project that actually procured through Fusion21, but I did just wonder in terms of interest from other housing providers. Are Engie, you're seeing it sort of an increase in? Obviously, this is a fairly unique scheme in terms of not everybody has the tower blocks and so on, but generally, and also there's also a question for you as well, Stuart. I mean, are you seeing big increases in your order books and or interest from the housing sector moving towards this technology?
Do you want me to go first, Jonathan?
I think from our point of view, yeah, I think from our point of view, we've certainly had a lot of interest, particularly from the northwest, if I'm honest, of housing associations and clients coming over, and we obliging and giving people the walk around and show what we do and how it's working. I think it's still early days. I think we've handed over probably 3 of the 7 tower blocks now. We're all up and running, with the rest to be complete come early July. So it's still early days. The technology works. It's very good. And we're confident that we can deliver them. It's it's definitely one we will be looking to sell to clients in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the interest in the renewable technology and ground source heat pumps has never been higher. The job that Jonathan alluded to that we carried out with Engie down in Enfield, I think sort of put ground source heat pumps on the map in terms of 8 tower blocks. They are being fitted with ground source heat pumps, which is about 400 flats. This project is slightly different to that one, using the open loop technology, but again it's a very large scale project. We believe with the open loop technology, the largest of its kind in the UK, possibly even wider than that. And there's lots and lots of interest, and lots of people, I think, now not just looking at the low-hanging fruit that Sam mentioned earlier, which is obviously the replacement of electric night storage heaters. I think what's interesting with this project at Gen 2 is that it's actually looking at replacing gas boilers with renewable heat technology and ground source heat pumps, and that's very interesting in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the fortune of actually going up to Gen 2 and visiting the scheme, and I do have to say, from my perspective, the 2 things that really, obviously there's a technology thing which, if I'm perfectly honest, probably went a little bit over my head, but very much the Jonathan, you and your colleagues, and also I know in terms of Gen 2, but the liaison with the residents and the way in which you were completing all of this work with residents in situ, and that liaison, I was really very, very impressed with what your teams were doing on the ground. It really is a great scheme. I think somewhere either on the Engie website or the Gen 2 website, I actually think there is also a link now on our website for those that are interested. There is a video that was taken with a drone, and it's well worth a watch. I'm conscious of time. we're a little bit past the 11 o'clock, but I really do want to thank our speakers today, Samantha, and the journey at 13 Group, to Jonathan at Engie, and Stuart at Kensa Heat Pumps. You will probably be aware that Fusion has recently relaunched our energy efficiency framework, which deals and allows our members to access this sort of technology. As I said, the Gen 2 scheme was procured through one of our frameworks, so please do go on our website if this is something you are interested in. Hopefully to our audience you found this morning useful. We will seek some feedback from you, because this is, as I said at the beginning, this is the first time that we've done it. Hopefully you've borne with us with one or two technological little issues. If there are any further questions, either email them to us. I think you've got either Ebony's email or Faye or my email, and we'll send them on to any of the panelists. Hopefully you've enjoyed this morning, and with that I'll say goodbye, and thanks you all very much for participating and joining.
Okay, yep, thanks very much now.